Tony Blair, welcome back to our programme.
Thank you.
So they say that the last time the map of England, the map of Great Britain shifted so seismically in this political manner was when you won in 1997 and the whole political map shifted. What do you say to what happened this time around?
So this time around, I think it was very simple. The Labour Party had moved to a far left position. It had ideas and actually an ideology that was never going to be supported by your traditional Labour voters. And of course, you had Brexit. So the combination of those two things meant that the Labour Party, which had frankly, a sort of indecisive position on Brexit, and then a far left leadership that was unacceptable to our traditional support, that's your explanation. And actually, you don't need to be a political genius to see it. You need to talk to be on about 5 doorsteps before you realise it.
It was also personality. I mean, I know you've talked about a hard left move in the Labour movement, the Labour Party, but it was also about personality. I guess, do you think a new person is enough to change Labour's electoral fortunes?
Absolutely not. So if Labour makes the mistake of thinking this was just a rejection of Jeremy Corbyn, it was the rejection of what he personified as a set of politics. So in the end, the reason why we lost, the rejection, was the rejection of a set of political ideas. It wasn't just of a person. Actually, as a person, you can say he's sincere in his beliefs, he believes in what he believes in, that's fine. But what he believed was a combination of far-left economic policy, harking back to the 60s and 70s, and hostility to the West in foreign policy that people were never going to vote for. The people in constituencies like the one I used to represent that's now gone Conservative, they were never going to support that type of politics.
Everybody knows, our US and global audience knows, that you were one of the main grandees, so to speak, who supported Remain and who wanted to reverse Brexit. And you did everything you could to do that, whether it was going to be a second referendum or whatever it was. Are you ready to concede that that is off the table, that Brexit will happen and that's what's going to happen to the United Kingdom?
Yes, it's going to happen now. I mean, it's tragic. We should never have agreed a Brexit general election, by the way. It was crazy to mix the two issues up. We should have had a decision by the British people on Brexit, self-standing as a decision, but we didn't. One of the many mistakes the Labour Party made was to agree a Brexit general election. It's now decided the government has a majority to do Brexit, which will happen at the end of January. It's then going to be a very difficult negotiation, but it's now important that we accept it will happen and try and make it work as best we can.
Given that this kind of pull to the extremes, if I could say, is happening not just in Britain, but also in the United States. 2016 seemed to be a revolutionary year for populist policies,
right,
and also around Europe too, to an extent. Do you see any way to bring back the kind of centrist policies, for instance, that you had? You were the first Labour leader elected in the last nearly 45 years, since 1974. And it was a centrist policy. It seems it's gone, this ideal. Everybody's polarised and partisan.
Well, it's not gone with the public. It's gone with the political parties.
Interesting. How do you know it's not gone with the public?
Because
they're the ones who vote.
Yeah, but it's not on offer. I mean, when it is on offer, by the way, as Macron showed in France, it wins. But if it's not on offer, of course, it can't be voted for. So I have absolutely no doubt at all that if we'd had a moderate Labour Party, even with a position on Brexit, because you can never unite the country over Brexit, but a position on Brexit that was sensible and clear, I think we would have had every chance of winning the last election, the one we just had. So, no, what's necessary, though, for the centre ground to revive is that it's got to get a policy agenda. This is the problem the centrist type of politics does have, is that it appears simply to be saying, look, the other two are extreme, so vote for me. And that's not enough. And there is a whole section of the population that wants quite radical change. There are people who are casualties of globalization, communities, individuals that feel left behind by it. You've got to address their concerns. You have to address the concerns over immigration. There's no party that can win an election in the Western world today without a strong, serious policy on immigration, for example, because there's also a cultural aspect to populism as well as an economic aspect. But having said that, if you found the right policy agenda, and in my view, it's all about understanding organizing yourself and mobilizing yourself around the technological revolution, which is the 21st century equivalent of the 19th century industrial revolution. If we do that and we fashion a new agenda in progressive politics and liberal politics, yeah, we'll win. Of course we will.
Interesting you say about immigration, because from the polls I've seen, people in Europe certainly have put climate and the environment above immigration. It's very interesting how that's shifted over the last couple of years. But be it as it may.
Yeah, it's also a very important issue, by the way.
Well,
but it's an issue, though, that the left, the progressive side, finds that relatively easy to deal with. It finds immigration much harder to deal with.
So extrapolate just for a second before we come back to Brexit. What do you see? You're very well known in the United States. You've spent a lot of time in the United States. You've been very close to American presidents politically. What do you see in the similar sort of thing that's playing out in the Democratic Party, where you've got what they call a socialist progressive wing versus a moderate, more centrist wing? And there seems to be a battle heading into this next general election.
Yeah, and that's the battle that's going on everywhere around the world. Look, the Democrats are much stronger than the British Labour Party in this sense because of the way your system works, and you have the primaries and you have a much broader popular base. Then I think, you know, for a lot of Democrat voters, they're going to put who can win as the number one issue, right? Whereas actually, believe it or not, if you poll Labour Party members, who can win is not the number one question. It's its own statement on the situation in the Labour Party. But so, and you know, even though you can see parallels in some regards between Elizabeth Warren, Bernie Sanders, and Jeremy Corbyn, actually, Elizabeth Warren, Bernie Sanders, I mean, they're highly capable political operators. You know, their opinion poll ratings. I mean, Jeremy Corbyn's was minus 40% net approval rating going into this election. I can't believe the Democrats would ever allow themselves to be in that position. So it's not the same in that way, but it is the same in the sense that, you know, you've got two choices in politics at the moment. You either try and stay in what would be a more left position and say we need to enthuse more people to turn out and vote. Okay, that's one strategy. Or the other strategy, which is obviously more from my type of politics, is to say how do we talk to the people that voted for the other side, and how do we bring some of them back to us? And they are, I'm afraid, really two quite different positions. And my worry is that the first always is based on the delusion that you're suddenly going to find these new voters that are going to be so enthused by a leftist program they come out and vote for you. Whereas the only tried and tested way of winning for progressive parties is to base yourself in the center and build out from there.
The House of Representatives has voted to impeach President Trump along party lines. What do you make of that? How do you think that will play into the politics we're discussing right now, into the next election, and into trying to make, I don't know, politics work for people?
I mean, you know, I'm not, although I know a lot about American politics, I'm not an expert on it. I understand all the different pressures that there are on people in the Democrat Party at the moment. But I suspect in the end, if impeachment just breaks on party lines, I think the only way you're going to win the next election is to find the program and the position that beats the position of President Trump. And I think that's the only way you're ever going to do it. But, you know, I mean, I might be wrong about that, and there's things I'm not seeing because I'm not involved in that. I've got enough trouble with my own politics without overly bothering about yours. But in the end, you know, one of the things I learned in politics is the only thing that ever made me frightened when I was a leader is if I saw a better idea than the one I had coming down the track at me. And those better ideas are the things you really fear. It never worried me when people were talking about scandals and crises, because all of those came and went. It was only a better idea that could threaten our hold on British politics, and that's why we won 3 elections. So if I were the Democrats now, I'd be searching for a better idea, for a way of explaining the future to people, of saying to them, look, this is how those people who are worried, anxious, believe that the next generation won't do better than this generation, this is how we make their lives better. And that's, I think, the only way you'll win in the end.
So let's bring it back to the UK. I don't know whether Brexit was a better idea, but that's the idea that came down the pike, and Boris Johnson got a stonking, as he calls it, mandate. What will that look like? Is it possible, do you think, that the electoral strategy will translate into a governing strategy, that Boris Johnson will be able to be a one nation Tory, that he'll be able to satisfy his Brexiters and his new working class constituents in the north, the Labour people who voted for him?
I mean, I think it depends enormously on the Labour Party. I mean, there is a real tension in this new form of right-wing nationalism because it's a combination of two elements. It's a combination of actually quite socially conservative people who really want a lot of support from government, help from government, but culturally they feel alienated at the moment from progressive politics. And that group of people is in combination with actually very free market, pro-business people, deregulation, lower taxes, and so on. I think that coalition has got obvious tensions and weaknesses in it. But it only breaks apart if the opposition is in a strong position and building a different and better coalition. And I think that for Boris Johnson in the UK, no, he will find Brexit very difficult because we've not agreed the big trade deal between Britain and Europe. If Britain really wants to start diverging on tax and regulation, it's going to find that negotiation really ugly. That's clear. On the other hand, you know, if the opposition remains sort of, as I've said, kind of marooned on Fantasy Island, putting forward policies the country's never going to accept, then it doesn't much matter whatever problems he's got, he can win again.
Do you think Boris Johnson saying immediately that he's, you know, going to make it, I think, illegal to stop a no deal like Parliament did before? They stopped him from having a no deal. He wants to take that off the table. Does that raise fears? Because this is what everybody's worried about for the end of this year, where a deal has to be concluded by the end of this year. He's saying no extensions, no nothing. We're just going to, you know, if necessary, head off the cliff again.
Yeah, no, that's a big problem. He's going to underestimate that problem at his peril, because the basic issue is this. We've been trading within the single market of the European Union. It's almost a unique trading system. It means you have the same rules and regulations for all the different countries of the EU. Now, you can leave the European Union and stick within that single market set of rules. That's, by the way, what Norway has as its status with Europe. But if you're deciding you want to make your own rules, and you still want access to the European markets, that's a tricky negotiation. And I don't see any way that that can be concluded by the end of next year. So if he's serious and he says, right, we're going to legislate that we're out no matter what in 2020, he's going to find that very difficult unless he's prepared to make a lot of concessions to Europe.
Which, of course, he thinks, which is big mandate, and certainly his people are saying that Europe is going to be making concessions to him because of this election result.
Yeah, but if the last 3.5 years has taught us anything, you know, these Brexiteers were telling us right at the outset, the Europeans would all fracture, the governments would be coming behind the scenes to us and asking for individual deals. Europe never lost its unity once during that entire negotiation. It had its negotiator, who's still the same negotiator, by the way. They never broke from him. They never undermined him. They kept 100% with him. And that's because, yes, of course, their trading relationship with Britain matters. But there's 28, now to become 27 members of the European Union. Their relationship between the 27 is more important to them than their relationship simply with Britain. Having said that, from my conversations with European leaders, they'll show enormous goodwill towards Britain. If Boris Johnson is smart about it, then I think he will find there's a real desire to keep a close relationship with Britain, even outside of Europe. And, you know, for the rest of us, my attitude is very, very clear now. We've got to try and make Brexit work. I deeply regret it, but there's no point in carrying on being churlish about it or carrying on regretting. We've got to try and make it work. But he's got to, if I were him, I would not give too many hostages to fortune around timetables.
He purged a lot of his moderates from the cabinet before this election. Is he able to tack towards the centre? Can he put his hardliners to one side now? Do you think he will?
Well, I think he'll want to tack to the centre on everything other than Brexit. The question is whether Brexit is going to continue to be such a big issue that you get a collision between that desire to go centre and just the facts of life around Brexit. So, you know, look, the Conservative Party has been one of the dominant parties in British politics for, I don't know, how many years now? 200 years, maybe more than 200 years. 200 years, certainly. And it's shown a remarkable capability of getting hugely difficult questions, breaking up a bit over it, and then coalescing back together. And, you know, the last week's election result was another example of how the Tory party can do this and come back together. So I think it's possible that he can do that. He'll find Brexit very hard. But for me, the challenge is all about providing a non-conservative, progressive, liberal, sensible alternative.
And finally, you mentioned the United Kingdom and the dominance of the Conservative Party. It's been said that this election victory, this Brexit thing, his deal, will challenge the integrity of the United Kingdom. That right now we have a border that his deal shows between the whole island of Ireland and Britain, and we have, you know, nationalists winning in Northern Ireland and in Scotland, which may want to have another referendum. What's your prediction for the integrity of the United Kingdom? I
mean, my hope.
Your prediction,
yeah,
given the realities.
Let me start with my hope, which is that it stays together. My prediction is that it probably will, but it's going to require a lot of effort because Brexit is a very divisive issue and it has added a whole dimension to the nationalist case in Northern Ireland and in Scotland. So I think there are still big reasons for the United Kingdom to stick together, but it's going to require an enormous amount of work to keep the UK together, given the Brexit result, and given that you've got a Conservative majority now in Parliament of a large amount in circumstances where, you know, for example, in Scotland, the Conservatives are a very small part of the political landscape.
Tony Blair, thank you very much indeed.
Thank you.